John David Stubenberg. How are you doing, man?
I'm great, Zoe. It's great to hear from you.
You are currently outside of Portland, where you have lived for quite a long time. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I'm in a suburb called King City. It's about half an hour south of the downtown.
Excellent. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. I mean, let's disclose to our audience that you and I are good friends. We've known each other for quite a while.
Quite a while,
Um,
yeah.
and despite that, I'm still gonna no holds barred. I'm gonna ask you all the tough questions. Are you ready for your
Absolutely. Bring it on, brother.
awesome? You and I both went to Punahou School. We both graduated in 1988.
Yes,
And despite the fact that we're friends, actually, there's quite a lot I don't know about you and your family.
sure.
As a teenager, I guess I never bothered to ask. So we're going to
Of course
delve
not. We were
into
too
that.
we were too wrapped up in being teenagers.
Exactly, exactly. We now have a different outlook on life and where we all came from.
Very true.
Is it safe to say that you've sort of been involved in the sort of nightlife world for how would you characterize, briefly what your main activities have been in Portland?
For about 20 years, I helped to run a jazz club here in Portland called Jimmy Max, and we had some notoriety. Again, you never want to try to be humble as possible, but the place was recognized by Downbeat Magazine as one of the great places in the world to hear jazz. And we were written up in the Wall Street Journal and the Esquire magazine, blah 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 blah. So I've been involved in the restaurant and bar industry in town in other ways, shapes, and forms as well. But that was really my primary thing.
And by the way, people call you JD. I introduced you as John David. Who are the Stubenbergs?
Wow. I guess I'd have to look at it from my mom and my dad. My mom was an Air Force brat, and who ended up, my grandfather ended up stationed in Honolulu, Hickam Air Force Base in 1958, if I remember correctly. And so mom ended up going to Radford High School. My dad's side of the family has been in the islands since just before right after the turn of the century, I guess. My great grandfather moved to Hawaii somewhere around 1908, 1910, on the promise of a job with the Libby Corporation, which people today don't remember Libby. They were sort of a contemporary of Del Monte or Dole. They're in the pineapple business. And he was a mechanic and went over there basically to help maintain and repair their equipment. And over time, he ended up starting his own company doing equipment manufacturing. And my grandfather went into that business. My dad went to Punahou just like we did. He graduated. He was class of '63. Well, my mother was class of '63 at Radford. They never met until they both ended up in college in Oklahoma. My dad trying to do something very different from being in Hawaii. My grandfather got transferred to Tinker Air Force Base when my mom was a senior at Radford. And so they ended up going to school, getting introduced on a blind date, married a year and a half later. And dad took a job with IBM back in Hawaii. And that's how they ended up back there. So that's how I ended up being born and raised there.
Interesting. So both parents grew up in Hawaii, but they met in Oklahoma,
They did.
and they were both kids from Hawaii who met in Oklahoma. That's probably not a lot of stories like
It,
that.
it's actually it's almost like a Hallmark movie. I think it was 4 people from Punahou went to the University of Oklahoma from the same class, which is just crazy. And my mother ended up rooming with one of these girls who wasn't really a friend of my dad's, but knew him. And so she sent him up on a blind date, Valentine's Day, 1964, to go see the Coasters. And they were married in May of '66. So, like I said, it's like a Hallmark movie.
So both your parents grew up in Hawaii in the 50s and 60s, sounds like.
Yeah.
We don't have to go into great detail about this, but what have they told you about what it was like when they were growing up? And do any memories sort of stand out that to you sort of suggests that this was a different time?
Somewhat from my mom. I mean, she talked about when Elvis came and they did film Blue Hawaii, it was a thing. And there was kind of that, there was still that sort of Hawaii was still kind of an exotic, kind of different place. And but for dad, having gone to Punahou like we did, Punahou was a different school. It was obviously a different time, but we could still find a lot of crossover. Ironically, his dean was Tom Metcalf, just like we had. So, which turned out to be saving grace for me when we got in the academy. That's a whole other story, but it's much more developed now. There's a lot more people. It's really, really crazy. I mean, when I go back home now, we're on Oahu and I visit friends and stuff, but typically I've got more family in the Big Island, and we like to get over the Big Island and just kind of get away because it's that the Big Island is still somewhat kind of reflection of what it was when my folks grew up, especially on the Hilo side. And so it's a little more laid back.
Stubenberg, is that a German name?
It is actually that's funny. We're actually planning on going back to Europe this coming summer for a family reunion. The family actually originated in Austria. There's actually a Schloss Stubenberg. It's somewhere south of Vienna. A Schloss is actually theoretically a castle. I've seen pictures that doesn't look like a castle the way you picture it in your mind, but it's a big house basically. And then people basically lived on land. They had they're supposed to take care of them. Apparently, my ancestors were not very good at that because they were chased out of Austria and ended up in Germany.
Well, make sure when you go back to Austria to visit Schloss Stubenberg that you walk around like you own the place. I mean,
right.
they probably should make you the heir to the throne or something. So tell me about, so you were born in Hawaii.
Yeah.
What was it like in the Stubenberg home growing up? Like, what was the dynamic like? What do you remember?
It was really, I can't imagine having a better experience as a kid. My dad put me in, it's funny because today I'm so far removed from doing anything in the ocean. I can't even imagine. I'd probably drown. But as a kid, I mean, I was in the water when I was an infant. I mean, I was basically more or less baptized in Makapu'u. And so, I mean, my dad did everything he could to put me in the ocean all the time. And learning how to body surf and later on boogie boarding. And then I got into spearfishing and stuff like that. And that was, there, I just can't imagine. And I know people grow up everywhere and they all have amazing experiences, but I can't imagine having a better one than I did. It was really, really something. I was very lucky. My folks, they both worked. My dad worked for IBM. My mom was a professional fundraiser. She was the development director for the Honolulu Symphony, and later on worked for Noah Valley Theater and did a lot of fundraising for other arts stuff in Hawaii as well. So they both worked really hard, and they really provided me with a lot of great experiences. I'm ultimately thankful.
Was your father kind of an aquatic, athletic kind of guy? Like, did he body surf? Did he spend a lot of time in the ocean, or did he want that for you?
No, he grew up body surfing. He grew up in Hawaii as well, obviously, and so he grew up body surfing, and it was something he was. And then when the boogie boards came out in the '70s, he immediately attached onto that, and that became a thing for me as well. So there's always been on that side of the family, there's always been a real connection to being either on the water or in the water.
When you were a kid, did you fish as well?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Primarily, we were trying for eating fish. So we were going for ono, mahi-mahi. And then, obviously, we fish bigger rigs and stuff too, looking for ahi or marlin. But they weren't necessarily the best eating fish. They're good, but your bread and butter stuff is mahi-mahi and ono.
So your mother was involved in the arts. She was involved in Manoa Theater.
Yeah. So she was with the Honolulu Symphony. Started out as a volunteer in the '70s, and eventually was hired on a paid position as their development director, which basically meant she was figuring out ways to make money. She would bring in guest artists to come in and work for the symphony. Arthur Fiedler, who was the director of the Boston Pops, was one of her main people, and he loved my mom. She brought in Mitch Miller as well, Luciano Pavarotti. It just goes on and on. My mom and dad were involved in helping start the Honolulu Symphony Fun Run, which remember I ran right through your neighborhood.
Yeah, I ran it.
Yeah.
The Opus races?
The Opus races, that's Opus, right. Yeah.
My dad ran all those. I had like Opus 1, Opus 2 t-shirts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a brainchild of of Mary Lee Corwin and David Benson. Mary Lee is Toby San Luis's mom. And so Toby and I would be every year we're down there, we would run around that course. It's crazy, barefoot too. Up and down the streets barefoot. I can't even imagine doing that today.
Yeah. Well, I ask about your mom being involved in the arts because you ended up sort of devoting a big chunk of your life to music and kind of the hustle around putting on shows.
Yeah.
You were influenced by what you saw with your mom?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. That and the fact, in the summers when I was young, my folks would have, this is several years in a row, we took trips to New York City and saw shows on Broadway, just Broadway musicals. And I mean, I was exposed to, we saw Evita in the original cast production with Patti LuPone, who's basically, she's the godmother of female performers on Broadway. And I was able to see her. I saw other original cast productions of Amadeus, and a lot of other shows. And so that influence plus being around not just all the symphonic music my mom was involved with, but they were heavily involved in all the pop and music at the time too. And so, I mean, the first concert I went to was Elton John. I was, I think, 8 or 9 years old.
What else do you remember about growing up in Hawaii in the 70s? What are some, images that are seared into your memory that are perhaps never to be repeated?
Oh man, I remember we used to. I'd go up to the North Shore to go body surfing or whatever, and we would sometimes stop up in a pineapple field and steal pineapple and wash them off and cut them up and have fresh pineapple waiting for us when we got out of the water.
Does stolen pineapple taste better?
Yeah. The fact that we stole it, I'm not so sure, but the fact that it was fresh right out of the field, and literally we cut it up, put it in a Tupperware, and put it in a cooler, and you got out of the water, and it was, I mean, I'd have canker sores because I just eating it so fast. It was, oh man, it was so good.
Tell me the history of your boogie boarding career or your body surfing career, however you want to characterize it. When do you think was such a like peak JD bodyboarding? Like where would you go? Who were you doing it with?
Oh man. I was very well, I started boogie boarding at what we call the walls down in Waikiki with a Makapu'u groin. And that was just, just taking off waves, going straight and just having fun. But I've been body surfing at Sandy Beach and Makapu'u since I was, basically my dad would pull me out of the water with him. And he basically kept an eye on me, make sure I wouldn't drown, but at a really young age. But I didn't start boogie boarding Sandy's until I was probably 14 or 15 thereabouts. And Sandy Beach at that time was the epicenter of in those days we call it bodyboarding. Let's just call it boogie boarding now. But that was the epicenter of the boogie boarding world. And I got very much into boogie boarding there, and being around these best guys in the world, that Ben Severson and Pat Caldwell. I could look back on it now and be really proud of the fact that I actually kind of earned my place in that lineup, where I'd go out and I'd be in the lineup with these guys and I'd get the waves I wanted to get, which that doesn't happen for a lot of people. So I think it's more of an issue with surfing than it is with stand-up surfing than it is with boogie boarding. But those guys all knew me by name. That was pretty cool. And try to get barreled as much as possible. That was my primary goal. And I did a lot. It was great. And I got to be pretty good, and I was a pretty good body surfer as well. I got involved with the Honolulu Body Surfing Club when I was a teenager, and started volunteering with them as a judge, as a spotter at different events, and I ended up on the North Shore working the World Bodyboarding Championships a couple times. And I still talk to some of those guys online. And like I said, I'm very far removed from it now. I can't imagine ever doing it again. But I'm really, I was very fortunate and was very honored to be kind of part of that scene. It was really amazing.
For those people who don't know what getting barreled is, describe the pleasures of being barreled.
Oh man, it's you're almost like, I want to say you're almost in a vacuum kind of, because the sound changes because you're in a sound chamber basically there. That kind of changes things a little bit, and it's this real feeling of kind of being part of nature, I guess. Maybe you look at it that way.
You mentioned not wearing shoes.
Yeah, I mean, you go back and look at our class pictures in the Na'opio when we were in the winning units, and half the kids aren't wearing any shoes. It's just you just didn't. You were running around. You might have slippers, and your slippers broke, and so you just be barefoot. And I mean, when I did, between that and walking in sand and stuff, you build these calluses on your feet. That's like, I mean, you basically have shoes already on the bottom of your feet, just even when you're barefoot. Like my dad told me when I went to college, he gave me a great party trick, which is kind of gross, but you could actually take a sulfur tip match, like a kitchen match, light it, and stick it to your callus in your foot, and it would stick and just burn away, and you wouldn't feel anything because the calluses are so thick, and it actually worked.
Yeah. How did you think about, or how did your family think about, being haoles? What did that mean?
I never really thought about it from our family's perspective, because especially my dad's side of the family had been in the islands for so long that we were pretty integrated into Hawaiian lifestyle. But I definitely, as a haole kid myself, going up and again going out to surf at places like Sandy Beach and Makapu'u and up on the North Shore and pretty much anywhere, I definitely encountered localism, where you know, kids who were not Haole would give me a hard time, and I got into more than a few fist fights, and got punched out a few times, punched out a few people, whatever. It was interesting to me. I didn't really get it at that age, but as I got a little older and I looked at it, I realized if somebody was actually really truly Hawaiian had an issue with me being Haole, I'd be like, yeah, you know what, I get it. You know, the white people went in there and we stole the islands. I mean, that's just, there's no two ways about it. You know, you're talking about I still try to explain to people how Liliuokalani was overthrown, and that the fact that a bunch of white rich businessmen decided that it was in their best interest to take the Hawaiian monarchy out so they could control, you know, their interests and make more money. And so they commandeered the U.S. Marines and went in there and said, "Get out." And most of the local kids that would have a problem with me were usually either Chinese American, Filipino American, Japanese American, or some mixture thereabouts. And so it's like, and so they're the local, but I'm a local too. I was born and raised here just like you were. So let's figure it out. You know, my grandfather and my great grandfather were so much a part of the pineapple and sugarcane industry that, and on one hand, it's like, man, that's kind of what screwed everything up. But on the other hand, it's a big part of Hawaii's history. So I definitely feel like our family was a part of that. You know, a little small part, but definitely a part of it, though.
Are you a 13-year Punahou
I
kid?
am. I did kindergarten at Central Union, and they made me repeat kindergarten at Punahou, well, because of the age thing. So yeah, Barwick Field was so much fun. The banyan tree, climbing up the banyan, it's hysterical to think about it now, because when we were kids, the banyan tree would have like a stripe of paint around it, like you can't climb higher than this, and it looks so high. And you go back and look at it now, it's like 5 feet off the ground. It's like, wait, what? But and then we'd have, you know, there was a merry-go-round right next to it that if you fell off this thing, you basically rip the skin off your body. I mean, it's crazy, the stuff that we did as kids that playing out there. You can't even imagine that happening today. Growing up in Punahou was really something. I mean, you know, every morning driving there, and there's you know, fresh rain on the grass, because it's always rained every morning. I don't think there was ever a morning in Manoa Valley that I didn't see rain when going to school every single day. When we got to be, this is actually really, this relates back to Tom Metcalf. When we got to be our freshman year, my dad took an assignment with IBM at Stanford University. They had an R&D center there, and it was like a 20-month assignment. Basically, they were going to downsize this thing. His job was to go and find all these guys new jobs around the country with IBM. And so he and my mom moved to the mainland, and I stayed back in Hawaii in our house. And Toby San Luis and his mom, Mary Lee, moved into the house with me. And Mary Lee basically was keeping an eye on me, as it were. And the problem that I ran into is that I was pretty upset that my folks took off or whatever. Not really, but sort of. And but the main thing was that I didn't have anybody looking over my shoulder, because Toby, you know, had grown up as a child of a single mom, and Mary Lee was she was heavily involved with the East West Center at UH in those days, on top of a million other things. So she was really busy. So Toby was a self-starter. He was a true latchkey kid, and really, he didn't have to have anybody looking over his shoulder to make sure the work got done. He just did it. I was not that way. And as a result, our freshman year, at the end of the first quarter, I was failing algebra, and I was failing ILS. And if you remember ILS, Introduction to Laboratory Science, that was basically the most knuckleheaded course offered in the entire curriculum of Punahou, and I was failing it. And it was because I just wasn't doing the work. And I got called into to Tom Metcalf's office, explained myself, and I told him what was going on. And he didn't know that my folks had gone to the mainland. And he got, I can't remember all how this went down, but he basically got a hold of my mom. My mom came back to Hawaii, and he sat down and kind of read her the riot act to a degree, just understanding how important freshman year was and stuff. And then and basically they were gonna expel me. I mean, my grades were such that I was gonna get tossed. But he, knowing my family, and then also we're family friends with Dr. McPhee as well, I think he interceded as well, and they said, okay, this is what you got to do. And so I immediately went to Dave Mowat in ILS, and he's like, look, you're not an idiot. You can do this. You just have to do the work. And his class wasn't graded on a curve. It was just straight points. So he said, if you do all the work and all the extra credit that I offer, you're going to be able to turn this grade around. And I did. By the end of the year, I had an A- average. after failing the first quarter, which is pretty remarkable. If Tom hadn't interceded and Dr. McPhee hadn't interceded, I would have ended up probably at Kalani High School, and who knows, I mean, which could have been fine, but I would not have had the experience that I did in the academy, which was pretty remarkable. So that was probably the most important thing that I went through. Yeah. Toby and I were already pretty good friends before that, and that just became even stronger. And I always kick myself because I don't see him nearly enough when I get back to Hawaii. And but yeah, we were really tight.
It's like you guys were brothers.
In a lot of ways, yeah. That was my freshman year, about half our sophomore year. Toby and Mary Lee were living in the house with me.
So as you progressed through high school at Punahou, what was the JD persona? Like, how do you think you were perceived? How did you feel about yourself? How did you fit in?
Well, you know, you and I both know we developed our own sort of clique of friends. We call the crew over the years. But I was, especially having been there for all those years, all the way back to kindergarten, I kind of got along with everybody. I was sort of a loner in some ways, but I definitely would I could go and talk to and relate with pretty much anybody around the academy that was in our class, because I knew most of them for so many years at that point, and it was a good experience.
I forgot to ask you this. Maybe I'll insert it earlier in the interview, but was the Stubenberg family religious at all?
No, not really. We were not particularly religious, but going to Punahou was for somebody who was not particularly religious, I think was kind of a interesting experience, because we went to chapel, and so I got exposed to Christianity in a pretty mild mannered way, which was good, and there was some life lessons to be learned there without having it stuffed down my throat, which is nice, compared to the experiences I hear from other friends of mine who came up, strictly Catholic or strictly Mormon, and not that those experiences are bad, they're just different, So it was that non-denominational Christianity was pretty effective for me. I think it was good. The learning a basic moral code, I think, coming out of that was healthy.
Yeah, I don't recall the word Jesus being used in chapel.
It's funny. I never thought about it, but you're right. I don't think I ever heard the word Jesus used. It was just sort of like God. And God is this all-encompassing kind of concept.
Were there any topics or teachers that were particularly exciting to you, or that you really resonated with you through your senior year?
Oh yeah, definitely. Man, we were. I say this all the time when I try to describe the experience of Punahou, that we were really lucky to have so many really good teachers who really were trying to get ideas through our heads. The first person I always think of is Jay Seidenstein for U.S. history. He was fantastic, and I didn't learn until probably halfway through junior year that he was Eric's dad. I had no idea. I was a helpful advanced writing kid, and she was great, and especially in reading stuff that I was writing and calling me on some things that were really that were just childish as hell, and it was good. It was that was really fantastic. She was great. Eric Kusunoki, who taught typewriting, amongst other things, I still talk to him every once in a while online. He was fantastic. God, so many. Jacques Pryor. I had a really pretty chill senior year, and I took medieval history with Mr. Pryor, and he had been one of my dad's teachers, and he had actually busted my dad for something. My dad got in trouble when he was in school there, and Mr. Pryor busted him for something. I can't remember what it is now, but when he saw my last name, he goes, "Wait a minute," and sort of, I was like, "Yeah, that's my dad." And I wasn't as much of a troublemaker as my dad was, but our family. My family's experience before me at Punahou was colorful, to put it mildly. It's not just the coursework; it was actually, and this is something that's really poignant right now because of where our country's at, is that we learn critical thinking. I saw Dr. McPhee a few years after we graduated, and he was getting ready to retire, and it was at a family thing, and he asked me, "So, what do you think the most important thing was that you learned at Punahou?" I said, "I learned how to learn."
Let's talk about you socially. What were you doing, especially like maybe last 2 years at Punahou? Like,
you're reaching for Banana Republic, man. Yeah, I got a job with Banana Republic at Almond Shopping Center. I started dressing a lot better. rather than just coming to school in jeans and a t-shirt. I was coming to school dressed like somebody who's going to do a job, and it was that was definitely I definitely got some I definitely got some looks from that, and I garnered my first girlfriend because of that, my first real girlfriend because of that. So that was kind of cool.
All right. So you had a cool off-campus job. How about parties and things like that? What were those like?
And somehow or other, we'd get our hands on beer, and we'd end up usually up on the water tank up there on Tantalus. And so it was a place you could get away and nobody would bug you, and you could talk and stuff, and then you weren't going to bother anybody around you.
Yeah. Good.
Is
Perfect.
that better?
Yeah, much better.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Oh, well,
man,
I can see myself now.
All right. You've been delivered from darkness for the last part of our interview. Well, I asked about parties in part because you went on to spend many years serving alcoholic beverages to people.
Sure.
Every night. Was there any kind of affinity for libations back when you were growing up? I mean, did you remember thinking like, this is kind of cool. I'm kind of like the center of the party. I'm getting people revved up. Like, what was your mindset?
Well, I started making cocktails for my family, for my dad, my grandparents, when I was probably 10 years old, maybe a little younger. So there was always kind of that little seed in there. But not really, I didn't really get into that. I mean, when I got to college, I developed a very bad habit of drinking a lot of beer, and which I'm still carrying that weight around to this day, and I'm trying to get rid of it. But it's just been, that's that was bad. I mean, I had one incident in college where I basically drank an entire bottle of Jack Daniels in one night and passed out. Probably had alcohol poisoning, but a dear friend of mine who's still friends to this day stayed with me and kept an eye on me all night long, made sure I didn't die. And I had one more incident like that later on here in Portland. And then I was like, okay, I need to kind of check myself here.
If you described yourself as kind of a social butterfly, you're able to sort of plug in with many different people.
Sure.
That's a skill that translates to bartending because you're
sure,
talking to strangers of all types. Some of them are strange, some of them are drunk, some of them are great. And you're able to handle the whole thing, right?
Yeah, there's definitely that's definitely a skill set that develops over time, where being able to find some common ground with anybody and be able to carry on multiple conversations and be able to be engaged with people is great. And also, learning, okay, this person's going to be fine, or this person I'm not going to be able to serve.
All right, final question, then I'll let you go, JD. It's been awesome to talk to you, but
absolutely.
Let's fast forward to graduation, 1988.
Yes.
You were 18, I guess soon to be 19. But what was on your mind? How did you feel? Where were you going?
I was, I guess, on one hand, there was a sense of relief. Like this. Okay, thank God this is done. But it was also when we're actually on stage and we're walking up. There's Dr. McPhee there, and like I said, I'd known Dr. McPhee since I was a little kid because he was a good family friend of my Uncle Johnny's. That look in his face, and Mr. Metcalf's as well, knowing how much I'd screwed up, how much I'd turned things around, and the smile on both their faces, man, that's the best kind of experience I could have asked for. I don't think I understood at that point in time how great that experience had been at Punahou. It took time and more maturity to be able to really appreciate how good we had it there. But I think there was elation and relief that I'd made it. I was, you have to understand too, that I'd already committed to going. I tried to get into schools on the West Coast, and I'd gotten waitlisted everywhere. My grades were pretty good. My SATs were pretty good, but they just weren't quite good enough to get to the top of these lists in some of the schools I wanted to go to. And so I ended up committing to go to Oklahoma, where my parents had gone, and went there to make my mom happy more than anything, which is the dumbest reason in the world to go to school. And we all recognize that now. But I was a little uncertain about what that experience was going to be like, and being away from not just home, but being away from the ocean for such a long period of time. I definitely would say I was a little nervous about that. And I had a great senior year, so it was cool.
Why did you have a great senior year?
Well, I was saying earlier, I did summer school every year and took max credits every summer school every summer. So we got second semester of my senior year. I had like 2 classes. I had Brit Lit and I had photography, I think, and that's it. So the rest of the time, and seniors, to show up for homeroom to, for, roll call, whatever. That's it. I'm gone. See ya. And
Were
I was in
you
the ocean.
were you one of the guys, in addition to going to the ocean, were you one of the guys who would go out and get plate lunch for lunch and bring it back to
Oh
campus?
yeah. Grace's, you betcha. But yeah, going down to Grace's for chicken katsu, man. Oh, hell yeah.
All of us who grew up in Hawaii and live on the mainland will frequently, when we say where we grew up, we get the question, well, what was that like growing up
Yeah.
in Hawaii? So when you get the question, what was it like growing up in Hawaii? What do you say?
Idyllic. Yeah. It was like, I had the experience that my parents gave me, and coming from a family that, I mean, my family's not rich, but they were in a financial position that we could have a lot of great experiences. I was very, very, very fortunate for that. But then beyond that, being able to grow up in Hawaii in a time where it wasn't as crowded as it is today, it wasn't as breakneck pace, and things were a little more, just a little more relaxed, and be able to be able to spend so much time in and around the ocean and kind of just sort of out and about, being outside and and enjoying the fruits of Hawaii's nature, as it were. That was, can't not beat that with a stick. I cannot imagine I've grown up anywhere else. And people always ask me, oh, you never got married or had kids, and I'm like, I got to a point, I was old enough. It didn't happen when I was younger, but I got old enough, and I'm like, at this point in my life, if I was going to have kids, A, I'd want to be young enough to enjoy, having them and raising them, but B, I'd want to be able to raise them in Hawaii and have them, have a similar experience to what I did. And I got to an age where that just wasn't going to happen. So it's like, all right. But that's where, how much that experience, even though I'm so far removed from it now and live such a different lifestyle, that's how much that experience meant to me, that I would have to have had to made that happen. And I definitely, I just can't imagine I've grown up anywhere better.